So thanks for stopping by and checking out DeployHub. One of the things we're going to do is we're going to walk through how we manage microservices and uh, also talk about how we reach back into hybrid as well as more traditional, which is now becoming termed legacy architectures, monolith type applications. So let's get started with the domains. So one of the things that we provide in DeployHub, which is based on the Ortelius project. Ortelius is the open source project, and we'll be focusing on the open source features today that DeployHub was built upon. So in the domain hierarchy, we take a look at how applications are put together based on a domain-driven design. So in this case, we can see that we have several domains here. So each one of these pieces is a domain in our domain hierarchy, and this allows us to categorize and organize our microservices as well as our applications. So here over in the Hipster store, which is our front-end application that's actually doing the consuming side of our microservices, we can see that we have the dev test prod hierarchy that we normally see in a waterfall or traditional approach. Then we have like our purchase processing and our store services, and this is one of the domains that we're grouping together additional services that we've broken out into a little bit finer grain services. Because what ends up happening in the microservices world is we end up having lots of services. If we think about how we organize or create a user profile service, we'll have a get service for the user profile, and then we'll have a service for dealing with the update, the delete, those types of transactions as well. So we'll group those in to like the shipping service, for example. So those microservices are organized under purchase processing in the shipping service category. And then we may have another team that may be working on just the store services, and they'll have their breakout as well, where we're looking at product catalog recommendation, some cart services, and ads service as well. So the domain hierarchy really allows us to structure how our services are organized, and this is going to span across multiple Git repos. So what we're doing here is breaking down the barriers, the business silos, and really looking at how do we organize and find our services in a domain-driven design and put these services into a catalog so we can find them. So not every team is going off and writing a single sign-on routine. We are able to categorize the single sign-on maybe like in a security service domain, and that would then be utilized by all teams within the company. And this is really important because if we look at it from the Git side, the Git repos are typically organized just based on the organization level and then the repository name. So the Git repositories are really on the flat side, which makes it hard to navigate and find things. DeployHub and Ortelius are going to break down that barrier and give us an extra level of organization that we need when we're dealing with microservices. From there, let's go ahead and take a look at how we're going to be placing our services into our catalog. So let's go ahead and go into one of our application versions, and we'll take a look at another view of our domain hierarchy. So over here we're looking at the domain hierarchy, And we can see again our purchase processing, our store services. And within each one of those, we're going to have our individual services here. So we could see for shipping services, we have many different versions of a shipping service that we want to consume or possibly that we can consume. And this is where we're laying out the relationship between the service and a version of our application. So in this case, we're looking at the 4th of July sale, the 97 version of that, and which services are being consumed. So in this case, this one's consuming version 17 of the service. If we just want to replace 17 with the latest one, we can just do a drag and drop and replace, and that's how we can update that. This blueprint can also be driven from a configuration as code aspect where we represent this in a YAML file, basically saying these are for this version of our hipster store, these are going to be the services that we're going to be consuming. Now, one of the interesting things that we're able to do with DeployHub and Ortelius as part of your CI/CD process is really take a look at and hook in and get a base view of the services and how they're being consumed. So once we have a base starting point, we can then from there on out, based on our CI/CD process, start maintaining this automatically. But we need our first starting point, which is our base version, and then from there we'll recognize throughout the CI process what's happening. So if we add, if we do a build and we get a new version of the ad service, that will automatically create a new representation of the ad service in DeployHub, and then we'll automatically create a new version of the application based on that new service. In this example, we're just dealing with about 11 or 12 services. Typically, we are hearing most applications are built up between 50 and 100 services for an application. Now, when we look at multiple applications at a company where let's say the checkout service here is shared, we'll see that multiple application teams are now consuming the service. So let's go ahead and look at it from that viewpoint, where we're going to flip the lens that we're looking at, and we'll take a view of, let's say, the cart service here, who's consuming it. So in this case, we only have 2 versions that are consuming this version 248 of our cart service. So we can take a look at, because we're tracking all the different relationships, we can switch our lens to see how, who's, in this case, who's consuming me. In the previous screen, we're looking at what am I consuming from an application standpoint. Again, we're going to dive into your CI/CD process. So when we deal with a new service that's coming along, we'll actually, we add a step to your CI tool, whether it's going to be Jenkins or Circle CI or TeamCity, and we fit into all those, the CI tools. And when we go through, in this case, this was done, this is built from Circle CI. We recognize that there's a new commit that triggered the build. And when that commit was triggered, we actually created a new Docker container, a Docker image. So here is our new Docker SHA that we kept track of, and how it was tagged in our registry. So this is what we're grabbing automatically out of our CI process. And then the next step is where we again look at how that is going to associate up into a version of the application. And once we have that relationship, the base application version defined, we'll automatically maintain that. And then when we go to deploy, we'll pick which version that we want to deploy, and we deploy to an environment. So in this case, I have several different environments. I have our hipster store cluster, then a couple QA environments. So when we deploy, we're deploying to an environment. An environment is actually made up of multiple endpoints if we need to. So at the environment level, we can actually take a look at, from this standpoint, of what's been deployed to it. So in this case, we could actually see that based on these boxes here, we have two different versions that have been deployed to this to the same environment. Now, some of the things that we get into, because we're managing these relationships, we can actually start asking questions about, okay, I've deployed to the QA3 environment and the QA4 environment. What's the differences between those two environments? And we can just say, okay, between QA3 and QA4, we have two different deployments that have happened, and we have some config pieces that are happening. So our deploy environment was those two. We have a different pipeline that happened to do the actual deployment. And if we go down, we'll see what's actually different between these two. So far, everything's the same. And the only difference that we're going to have is the basic environment and the application version. So in this case, we have version 97 was deployed to the QA4 environment, and we have an older version over in the 10.6 version was deployed over to the QA3 Windows environment. So we'll also track not only the components that are being deployed, but also configuration that has been done at that level. So it makes it very handy for us to answer the questions of, what's changing. We can also compare between the two different versions that have been built. Let's look at what's changed at that level. We can see that at this level, we ended up with a new git commit and a new container at that point. So if we had other information about the configuration changes between components, we'd be tracking that as well. Also, we could take a look at it from the application standpoint. Let's go to those two versions and compare those. And we'll look at the differences between 94 and 97 here. And we can see at this level, the only thing that's been changing is the cart service. One of the things we do with Ortelius and DeployHub is we execute deployments incrementally. So in this case, the only thing that's happened between those two application versions and where they were deployed to is we were updating the just this one cart service version. Looks like everything else was the same. So with this, we're really focused on how an application is put together, where that application version is being deployed to, and then tracking the differences as it moves through the pipeline. So in this example, we've been just looking at a couple QA environments and a cluster that we've deployed to, but we can also look at building this out into a full pipeline example where we have dev environments or multiple dev environments, and we have multiple QA environments, and then we have our prod environment that we may have, like a staging prod environment, and then our regular full production environment. Throughout the whole process, DeployHub and Ortelius will be tracking everything that's happened, and we'll be doing an audit control of exactly what's being performed at the different levels. So we can actually see at this level everything that's happened, whether we've done an attribute change. We'll look at the deployment log. We have a full history of what actually happened at the deployment level. In this case, just that cart service that we're looking at was the only thing that changed that went out to the cluster in this example. So with that, that's like a quick view of what we have going on with DeployHub. And let's go ahead and open it up for any questions that you guys may have. So if you guys want to give this a try, we do have a sandbox. So if we go to DeployHub.com, and from here, get over to that site, we can sign up. And what we'll do is go through the registration process right here. And what the end result will be is you'll get an email and you'll get a full application that we kind of bootstrap for you. So you'll see the Hipster Store process, application and components out there. And you can go ahead and deploy this. So you can pick a version and that we supply with you as sample data, and you can pick deploy. When you deploy, you'll only see the Hipster Store cluster. The other two I've set up just for this demo, but you can deploy to the Hipster Store cluster. Now, one of the interesting things that we've set up with the Hipster Store cluster is it's actually being deployed out to GKE, where we have our demo cluster that's running. And we have a pre-action out here. We'll actually go out and resize the cluster so the deployment is hits the cluster off and running. So this is a pre-action. We take down the cluster every night, and so the next time somebody comes through and does the deployment, we go ahead and resize it as a pre-action at that level. So go ahead and sign up. We'll give you that sandbox. If you run into any issues with the sandbox, just give us the email and we'll help take care of that with that process. Like I said, when you do the sign up, you'll get an email giving you the links and stuff to get you going. So any questions? Let me see if I get to the chat here. Yep. So we answered that question. Like I said, if you're interested in the Ortelius project, which is what DeployHub is based upon, that website is going to be Ortelius.
The site and everything is free. I made the detail.
Ortelius.io. And here you'll get information about what the Ortelius is, how to get to the GitHub project, and if you want to join the GitHub project, we can get you set up on that front. There's information about how to join the open source project at the README level here. So if you look at the Ortelius project, we'll have the README that says how to get started and all those pieces as well.
Hi, Steve, this is Vlad. Thank you very much for this presentation. It was very useful. I have a small question about environment level. You mentioned that environment level includes several endpoints. Is there any limitation on the number of endpoints which may be in any environment?
No, you can have, one of the interesting things when we look at it in an environment is an environment is going to be made up of different endpoints. So in this case, I'm using one of my global local host endpoints. And you can set as many servers for that endpoint that you'd need. So let's say, and you can mix and match. Like I said earlier, in this demo, we're looking at just microservices and deploying containers to a Kubernetes cluster. But let's say we wanted to deploy not only to Kubernetes, but also a database change. We would add a database server as another environment, another server to our environment. And when you work at the individual endpoint level, we can actually assign kind of like a role to the endpoint. So this one has two different, looking at being an application server as well as managing the Kubernetes. In the Kubernetes world, we actually are kind of doing like a jump box type of access, because we have actually the local host is connecting to the Kubernetes cluster. You don't really like log in directly into Kubernetes cluster, so we go to the local host and can configure that local host to connect up to the right cluster running in any cloud provider. So you can mix and match cloud providers at that level. But with this, this endpoint definition, if we added a new endpoint for the database server, we can tag it as a database server. And when we have a component that's for a database change, we can actually route the database change to the database server and route the Kubernetes change over to the Kubernetes endpoint. So when you build up your environment, you may have a hybrid world where you have some transactions that are in Kubernetes. I mean, some services that are in Kubernetes. You may have more of a monolith piece that's running like Tomcat or Jetty or WebSphere, and then you may have your database piece. So you can actually combine those three different types of endpoints into a single environment, and when you deploy, we'll go ahead and route to the right components to the right endpoints. I know that was a long answer, but just wanted to show you the flexibility that we're able to perform with DeployHub.
Thank you very much, Steve. Thank you.
Yep. Any other questions? Pull up chat here. No. And then when we look at applications as well, you can have as many applications defined. We look at on the licensing perspective, we have we count the base application version. So in this case, we have the 4th of July sale is one of the base application versions, and the Labor Day sale. On the base application version is like our starting point. From there, like I said, we can start, once we get that base definition, we'll, DeployHub and Ortelius will start maintaining that automatically for you through your, whether it's going to be Jenkins, we have like a Jenkins plugin, also a Jenkins Groovy library, and that's where we'll start maintaining your application definitions and these versions going forward for you automatically. Okay. Well, thank you everybody for stopping by and taking a look at DeployHub. Again, what I showed you today was all the features that are in the Ortelius project. Some of the things that are DeployHub specific are going to be around release management, managing releases, and releases are deploying multiple applications at the same time. Environments in the DeployHub world, we have what's called smart calendaring, which you can set up deployment schedules and release planning around that. And then also when we get into like the setup, we can define users in the DeployHub version against LDAP servers, that type of world. So there's some more flexibility in users and groups in DeployHub versus Ortelius. But everything we did today was based on the open source project Ortelius. So go ahead and sign up. Again, just go ahead and hit the DeployHub website. And what ends up happening is you'll be using the SaaS version of DeployHub that is that we've been looking at today. And if you want to do on-prem, that's available as well. If you look at the user guides, which you can get to from the README pages, the user guides will show you how to install locally in your own environment. Again, thank you for stopping by. And if you have any questions, you can reach out to me. Email is real simple, steve deployhub.com, and I'll be happy to answer any of your questions. And also, we will be on the chat in DevOps world. So if you want to ask any questions, just come to our booth and we'll be on that chat session there as well.